In this video, I'm going to be walking through the steps I took to build a fully automated sprout grower. The misting system I decided to use features adjustable mister heads that can be set to stream or mist water, which is the ideal option for growing sprouts and seedlings. Find a bin to hold the amount of sprouts you wish to grow. I used a 9x13 by 6 inch clear plastic container. In order to keep the misters evenly spaced out, I used a strip of wood and drilled holes using a 23/64 drill bit to hold the misters in place. Next, I cut the strip of wood in half with a table saw. Rubber bands worked well to hold the strips together. Next, I cut a slot in a piece of scrap wood to hold the mister strips in place. After making 4 of these holders, I secured one to each corner of the container with a wood screw. Next, I moved to the kitchen where I brought water to a boil to heat the ends of my silicone tubing to make them more pliable and easier to fit into the connectors. I found using my fingers and a pair of pliers as needed helped work the tubing until it fit snugly. Because I didn't have a proper tube plug, I used hot glue to fill the last mister in my sequence to prevent water from leaking out the end. With the tubing out of the way, I went to work on the electronics. I connected a 24-volt power adapter to a 24-volt water pump. 24 volts was more than enough current for the system, and the pump had good reviews online. Next, I inserted the positive red wire into the top port of the adapter plug, and since I ran out of solder, decided to tape the negative black wire to the side, which sufficed. With the wiring in place, I connected a 6mm inner diameter tube to the intake and outtake water pump ports and screwed the pump to a block of wood for stability. Next, I used 4 non-rust food-safe metal trays for sprouts that fit into my container. I found a drying rack at the dollar store that worked perfectly to keep the trays off the bottom of the container to encourage air circulation and prevent molding. Next, I used a 5/16 drill bit to make a drainage hole for excess water and hot glued a 6mm inner diameter tube to guide water into a bucket for reuse. Because the mister heads required 4mm tubing and the water pump required 6mm tubing, I used a 4mm to 6mm tube adapter to connect the different sizes. After setting up everything, I noticed that the angle of the misters wasn't optimal. To fix this problem, I decided to use a dowel to make the position adjustable. After clamping the dowel in place, I used a 5/64 drill bit to drill a hole to fit a toothpick. Next, I drilled 4 dowel-sized holes into the container for the dowel and used rubber bands to hold the mister strip in place. After finding the perfect angle, I taped the toothpicks in place to hold the position. For added tubing support, I used scrap wood to create braces for the tubing to help relieve stress during operation. Because the diameter of all 8 mister heads combined was still less than the diameter of the intake tube, more water could enter the pump than the amount that was exiting. Because of this, I decided to wrap cheesecloth around the intake tube to restrict water flow through the pump and prevent clogging. You may need to adjust the layers of cloth until the water pressure is optimal. With the construction out of the way, I used a digital timer with minimum on-off time intervals of 5 seconds to control how much and how often the sprouts get watered. I selected time cycles and set it to turn on for 5 seconds and off for 59 minutes. I plugged the timer into a wall outlet and plugged the water pump into the timer. Because documenting what you are growing and when you started growing seeds is important, make sure you use a dry erase marker to date and label sprouts on the side of your container. I noticed that some types of seeds like alfalfa sprouts are very small and fell through the holes in my trays. To fix this, I cut a scrap piece of screen and placed it into the bottom of the trays to prevent seeds from falling through the bottom. Next, I spread a single layer of sprout seeds across each tray. You may need to use more or less depending on the size and kind of sprout. According to the packages, all 4 varieties of seeds I used should take 4 to 6 days to fully sprout. My sprouts took 6 days to fully mature while growing in my 65-degree kitchen out of direct sunlight. Make sure you try to use filtered water for best results. And if you want to harvest sprouts every day, make sure you alternate when you start growing each variety so you can harvest a tray every day. If you plan to grow sprouts regularly, make sure you buy seeds in bulk because buying them in small bags can be very costly. Now sit back and let your brand new fully automated sprouter grow you delicious sprouts.